My name is Natalie, and the day my life truly began was the day my parents threw me out like garbage on my 26th birthday. I remember the smell of the car that night, stale coffee, and old upholstery. I had just finished a 10-hour shift at the grocery store, feet throbbing in cheap sneakers, my uniform shirt sticking to my back. All I wanted was a shower, a cheap takeout dinner, and maybe a quiet hour to pretend that being 26 felt different than being 25. I pulled into the driveway of the house I had lived in for most of my life, the house where I paid the utility bills and covered the internet so my little sister could stream movies without buffering. I didn't see balloons. I didn't see a happy birthday sign. I saw a pile. At first, my brain refused to process it. It looked like a yard sale gone wrong. There were black trash bags bursting at the seams. My scuffed suitcase, the one I used for the one vacation we ever took. A plastic bin filled with my old textbooks. My second-hand computer monitor, wrapped haphazardly in a scratchy blanket, sitting precariously on top of a box of winter coats. It was my life cataloged and dumped on the concrete porch like refuse. I parked the car crookedly, the engine sputtering into silence. My mom was standing on the porch, arms crossed over her chest, tapping her foot. My dad stood a few feet behind her, studying the siding of the house like it was suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. And my sister, Jinya, my little sister, who I had driven to school 1,000 times, was sitting on the steps, scrolling through her phone, looking bored. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet sounding like gunshots in the quiet evening. "Mom?" I asked, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to. "What is this?" My mother didn't uncross her arms. She looked at me with the same expression she used when she found a stain on the carpet. "You are 26, Natalie. This has gone on long enough. We need the room." I stared at her. "Today? You're doing this today? On my birthday?" She rolled her eyes, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "Don't make this dramatic. We raised you. We did our part. You have a job. You'll figure it out." I looked at my dad. "Dad?" He finally looked up, but his eyes didn't meet mine. They hovered somewhere around my chin. "It's for your own good, Nat. You'll grow if you're pushed. You've gotten too comfortable." Jenna looked up from her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. "Everyone I know moved out ages ago. You should be thanking Mom, plus I need the bigger room for my setup." I stood there, the humidity of the evening pressing against my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to know least every dollar I had contributed to this household over the last 3 years. I wanted to remind them that I was the one who fixed the router, who organized the taxes, who made sure there was milk in the fridge. But I looked at their faces, my mother's cold resolve, my dad's cowardice, my sister's entitlement, and I realized something that turned my blood cold. They didn't care. Arguments require an audience that listens. I didn't have one. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't give them the show they were clearly bracing for. I walked past them to the pile. I picked up the first box. It was heavy, filled with books. I carried it to my beat-up sedan and shoved it into the back seat. Then I went back for the monitor, then the trash bags. My mom watched me, maybe waiting for me to crack, waiting for me to fall to my knees and plead so she could feel righteous about tough love. But I didn't speak. I loaded my car until the suspension sagged and the rearview mirror was blocked by bedding. When the last bag was in, I stood by the driver's side door. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice steady. My mom shrugged. "You're an adult. Stay with a friend. Find a motel. Just don't expect to come back tonight. We've already started moving Jenna's things in." My mom and dad kicked me out on my own birthday, and I said nothing. I got in the car, turned the key, and backed out of the driveway. I watched them, in the side mirror 3 figures, standing on a porch that was no longer mine, until I turned a corner and they vanished. I drove until the suburban manicured lawns gave way to highway signs and industrial parks. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a savings account worth mentioning. I had a car full of junk and a heart full of ash. I pulled into a motel about 20 miles out of town. The kind of place where the neon sign buzzes like a trapped insect and half the letters are burned out. The room smelled of bleach and decades of stale cigarette smoke. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. I reached into my bag and pulled out the single cupcake I had bought for myself earlier that day. The frosting was smashed against the plastic container. I stuck a plastic fork into it and ate it in the dark. Happy birthday to me. I checked my bank balance on my phone. The number staring back at me was terrifyingly low. I had enough for maybe a week of this motel, gas, and food if I ate ramen. For a fleeting second, the urge to call my mom clawed at my throat. Just to hear her voice, to apologize for whatever invisible crime I had committed. But then I remembered the look on her face, the absolute lack of hesitation. They had thrown me away to make space for Jenna. I lay back on the scratchy comforter and stared at the water stains on the ceiling. I made a promise to the darkness. I will never beg to go back. If they wanted me gone, I would stay gone. And one day, I would make them regret the day they decided I was disposable. The next morning, reality hit like a hangover. I woke up with a stiff neck and a notification on my phone. Happy birthday, Natalie, from my dentist's automated system. It was the only birthday wish I received. I showered in lukewarm water, put on my grocery store uniform, and drove to work. Walking into the store felt surreal. The automatic doors slid open, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the same soft rock playlist was playing on the speakers. My whole life had collapsed overnight. Yet here I was, asking a stranger if they had a loyalty card. I worked that shift in a daze. Every time a customer complained about the price of eggs or a bruised apple, I wanted to laugh hysterically. You think bruised fruit is a problem? I'm homeless. But I didn't snap. I smiled. I bagged groceries. I nodded. And on my break, I sat in my car and scrolled through rental listings. The prices in Seattle were a joke. Studios cost more than I made in a month. I widened the search radius, then widened it again. Finally, I found a listing for a studio apartment in a gritty part of the city. Cozy, the ad said. Character. In rental speak, that meant small and falling apart. I drove there straight afterward. The landlord was a guy who smelled like motor oil and didn't ask for a credit check, just a deposit and the first month's rent in cash. The room was barely bigger than a parking space. The window looked out onto a brick wall, and the radiator hissed like a snake. I'll take it, I said. I moved my trash bags and boxes in that night. I slept on a pile of blankets on the floor because I didn't have a mattress. But as I locked that flimsy door, I felt a strange flicker of pride. It was ugly, it was cold, but nobody here could tell me to leave. The next 6 months were a blur of exhaustion. The grocery store money wasn't enough, so I picked up a second job working the late shift at a burger joint a few blocks away. My life became a cycle of grease and gravity. Wake up at 5 a.m., drive to the grocery store, stand for 8 hours, drive to the burger place, stand for 6 hours, come home smelling like fry oil, pass out, repeat. I lost weight. I stopped seeing friends because I couldn't afford drinks, and I didn't have the energy to pretend to be happy. I was a ghost haunting my own life. But then the universe threw me a lifeline in the weirdest possible packaging. Her name was Monica Lee. She was a regular at the grocery store, always coming through my line around 600 p.m. on Tuesdays. She looked like the kind of woman who had her life together. Sharp blazers, expensive haircuts, always talking into a Bluetooth headset about deliverables, and seed rounds. One Tuesday, she was frazzled. She was juggling a laptop bag, a purse, and 3 bags of groceries when the handle of her eco bag snapped. Oranges and cans of sparkling water rolled everywhere. I flipped the lane clothes sign on and came around the counter. "I got it," I said. I grabbed the roll of heavy-duty tape from the register drawer and quickly patched the bag, then double-bagged the heavy stuff. "Duct tape holds the universe together," I joked, handing her the bag. She stopped and actually looked at me. Not through me, like most customers, but at me. "You're the one who always reboots the self-checkout machines when they freeze, right?" I shrugged. "I just know the admin code. It saves time." "You're efficient," she said, studying me. "How long have you been working here?" "Too long," I said before I could stop myself. The filter between my brain and my mouth was thin these days. "My parents kicked me out a few months ago. 2 jobs. Trying to survive." She didn't give me the pity look. She nodded. "You ever thought about tech? My startup is dying for people who can actually troubleshoot without panicking." I laughed. "I didn't finish college. I bag groceries." "The internet is free," she said. She pulled a pen out of her purse and wrote an email address on the back of her receipt. "Look up front-end development. Learn the basics. If you're serious, email me. I can't promise a job, but I can promise a direction." I took the receipt. That night, after my burger shift, sitting on the floor of my studio with my laptop balanced on a cardboard box, I typed front-end development into the search bar. It looked like alien hieroglyphics: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I almost closed the tab, but then I looked around my room. I looked at the peeling paint. I thought about my dad telling me I was a wasted investment. I opened a tutorial. For the next 8 months, I ceased to be a person. I became a machine. I listened to coding podcasts on my commute. I watched tutorials on my lunch breaks, propping my phone up against the register. I coded late into the night until my eyes burned and the letters swam on the screen. I lived on ramen and caffeine. I missed movies. I missed sleep. There were nights I cried over broken code, feeling stupid, feeling like I was kidding myself. Who are you kidding? You are a grocery clerk. But every time I wanted to quit, I visualized my mother's face on the porch. "We need the room." I wasn't doing this for passion. I was doing this for revenge. Success was the only weapon I had left. When I finally emailed Monica, I included a link to a portfolio website I had built. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. She replied 20 minutes later. "Not bad. Can you come in on Thursday at 10 a.m.? I called in sick to the grocery store. I put on the only pair of slacks I owned. I walked into that glass-walled office building in downtown Seattle, feeling like an imposter who was about to be escorted out by security. The interview was a blur. They didn't ask about my degree. They asked about my code. They asked how I would solve a problem. I talked about fixing the self-checkout machines. I talked about managing the dinner rush at the burger joint when the POS system went down. I talked about grit. They offered me a junior developer position. The starting salary was more than I made at both my jobs combined. When I got the offer letter, I stood in the middle of my tiny, crappy apartment and just screamed. A guttural, primal scream that shook the dust off the radiator. I was out. I was really, finally out. The transition wasn't easy. I suffered from massive imposter syndrome. I was surrounded by guys in hoodies who had been coding since they were 12. I was the diversity hire, the charity caser at least. That's what I told myself. But when it's come to my solo, I had the work ethic of someone who knew what it felt like to have absolutely nothing. When the other juniors clocked out at 5 p.m. to go to happy hour, I stayed until 8 p.m. I documented everything. I volunteered for the bugs nobody else wanted to touch. Monica became my mentor. She was tough, demanding, and exactly what I needed. You apologize too much, she told me once. Stop acting like you're lucky to be here. You earned the seats, now do the work. 1 year turned into 2. Junior dev became mid-level dev. I got a raise, then another. I moved out of the shoebox studio and into a decent one-bedroom apartment. I bought a real mattress. I started saving money aggressively. I didn't buy fancy clothes. I didn't go on expensive trips. I hoarded cash like a dragon because deep down, I was still the girl in the motel room terrified that the bottom was about to fall out. But the bottom didn't fall out. The floor got stronger. Around my 29th birthday, 3 years after the eviction, my lease was coming up for renewal. The landlord wanted to hike the rent by 20%. I looked at my savings account. The number sitting there was significant. It was a down payment kind of number. I started looking at houses. Not mansions, not sprawling estates. I wanted something that was mine. Solid. Permanent. I found it in a neighborhood called Ballard, a narrow 3-story townhouse. It wasn't perfect, it needed paint, and the appliances were dated, but it had good bones. It had a balcony off the master bedroom. It had a spare room on the top floor filled with sunlight. When I walked into that spare room during the open house, I felt a physical ache in my chest. This was the room my parents claimed they needed. This was the space I had lost. I put in an offer. It was a bidding war, but I had a good credit score and a solid pre-approval. I wrote a letter to the sellers, telling them this would be my first home. I got the house. Closing day was quiet. No family to celebrate with, no dad to inspect the inspection report. Just me, my real estate agent, and a mountain of paperwork. When I signed the final document, the notary smiled. Congratulations, you're a homeowner. I drove to the house that night. It was empty. The hardwood floors gleamed in the moonlight coming through the windows. I lay down in the middle of the living room floor and just listened to the silence. It wasn't the lonely silence of the motel. It was the silence of peace. It was the silence of safety. I spent the next year making it a home. I painted the walls a warm sage green. I turned a spare room into a killer home office, with a standing desk and a library wall. I hosted game nights for my new friends, people who knew me as Natalie the developer, not Natalie the disappointment. I started sharing snippets of my story online. Anonymous blog posts about toxic families, financial independence, and breaking the cycle of guilt. I found a community of people just like me, the black sheep, the scapegoats, the ones who had to parent themselves. It was healing. I thought I had closed the book on the Brooks family drama. I thought they were just characters in my backstory now, villains I had defeated. I was wrong. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. I was in the kitchen, meal prepping for the week, listening to a podcast. The sun was streaming in, and life felt calm, predictable. Then the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the entryway. I checked the smart doorbell camera on my phone. My heart stopped. Standing on my porch, looking distorted through the fisheye lens, were 3 people I hadn't seen in nearly 4 years. My mother, my father, and Jenna. My mom looked older. Her hair was grayer, her face drawn. My dad looked smaller, his shoulders slumped in a cheap windbreaker. Jenna was leaning against the railing, looking annoyed, typing on her phone. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. How did they find me? I had never given them my address. I had blocked the numbers years ago. For a moment I considered hiding. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could crawl into the bathroom and wait for them to leave. No, I looked around my living room, my furniture, my art on the walls, my house. I wasn't the 26-year-old girl shivering in a driveway anymore. I was the woman who owned the deed to this land. I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door. The air outside was crisp. My mother looked up, startled, as if she hadn't expected me to actually answer. She blinked, her eyes scanning my face, then looking past me into the foyer. "Natalie," she said. Her voice was the same, that smooth, deceptively calm tone that set my teeth on edge. "You look, well, what are you doing here?" I asked. I didn't step back. I filled the doorway. My dad stepped forward, trying for a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can we come in? Just for a minute? It's chilly out here." "No," I said. "State your business." Jenna looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "God, you're still so dramatic." "Just let us in, Nat." My mom sighed, adjusting her purse strap. "We need to talk, Natalie. Things have changed. We heard you bought this place." "Who told you that?" "People talk," she said vaguely. "Look, your father lost his job 6 months ago. The market shifted. We fell behind on the mortgage at the big house." I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy exactly. Shock. My dad loved that house. He built his identity around that house. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, keeping my voice flat. "But I don't see what that has to do with me." My mother straightened up, regaining some of her old imperious height. "The bank is foreclosing, Natalie. We have to be out by the 1st of the month." She paused, waiting for me to gasp, to offer help, to fall into the role of the dutiful daughter. I stayed silent. "We need a place to stay," she continued, her voice hardening. "Just until we get back on our feet. We know you have extra rooms here. We saw the listing photos online before you bought it. 3 bedrooms. It's perfect. Perfect." I repeated. "You want to move in here?" "We're family," my dad said, his voice pleading now. "We helped you when you were starting out. We raised you. It's time to return the favor. You kicked me out," I said. "On my birthday, you put my stuff in trash bags." "That was tough love," my mom snapped. "And look, it worked. You have a house. You have a career." "If we hadn't done that, you'd still be bagging groceries. You owe us for that push." She took a step toward the door, assuming the conversation was over, assuming I would move aside. "We figured Jenna can take the spare room upstairs," she said, pulling a folded piece of paper out of her purse. "And Dad and I can take the guest room. We brought a lease agreement. We want to make sure everything is official. We think it's best if we're added to the deed too, just for legal protection. You know, treating the house as a family asset." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "A family asset?" I whispered. "Yes," she said confidently. "We're a team. When one wins, we all win. We need to consolidate our resources." I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't here to apologize. They weren't here to reconnect. They were here to colonize. They had consumed their own resources, and now they were here to consume mine. "You aren't moving in," I said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You aren't touching this house. And you are definitely not getting on the deed." My mother's face twisted. The mask of civility dropped. "You ungrateful little brat. We are your parents. You have a legal obligation to care for us. This house is built on the foundation we gave you. This house is built on the money I earned after you threw me away," I said. "If you don't let us in," Jenna said, stepping up, "Mom says we can sue you. Grandparent laws or something. Filial responsibility." She looked it up. "Go ahead," I said. "Sue me." My mom stepped closer, invading my personal space. "Don't test me, Natalie. We know things about you. We know your history. If you force us to get lawyers involved, we will take this house and we will leave you with nothing." Just like before, I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her. I was disgusted. "Get off my porch," I said. "Now." "You'll regret this," my dad warned, his face reddening. "I regret opening the door," I said. I slammed the door in their faces and locked the deadbolt. I watched on the camera as my mom screamed at the door, kicking the welcome mat. Eventually, they got into their car, a rusted sedan. much older than the one they used to drive, and sped off. I leaned against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Family asset, sue you. They were desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I walked into my solo, but when it's come to my solo, my hands shaking. I needed a plan. I grabbed my phone and called the only person I knew who could help, a guy named Eric I had met through work. He wasn't just a coder. He was a former paralegal who knew the law better than most lawyers. Eric, I said when he picked up, I have a problem. My parents just showed up and they're threatening to sue me for my house. He listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, he didn't offer empty platitudes. Okay, he said. First, they can't just take your house. That's not how it works. But if they're talking about family assets and threatening legal action, you need to check something immediately. Check what? Your credit report, he said grimly. The full one. Sometimes when parents feel entitled to their children's success, they don't wait for permission to take a slice. If they're this bold about the house, I'd bet my license they've been bold about other things. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I hung up and opened my laptop. I navigated to the credit bureau's website. I typed in my social security number. I answered the security questions. The page loaded, and my world stopped. The screen of my laptop glowed in the dim kitchen, casting long, eerie shadows across the counters I had worked so hard to pay for. I stared at the credit report, blinking, waiting for the numbers to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But they remained frozen. They remained damning. There were accounts I recognized: my car loan, my student loan, my primary credit card, and then there was the shadow life. A credit card opened 3 years ago, right around the time I got my first promotion. Maxed out. Limit, $15,000. Status, past due. A personal loan for home improvement taken out 18 months ago. Balance, $22,000. A line of credit attached to a bank I had never stepped foot in. And the kicker, a co-signed lease on a luxury vehicle I had never driven. All of it was under my name, my social security number. But the mailing address listed on every single one of these fraudulent accounts was my parents' house. The house they were losing. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the granite island to keep from sliding to the floor. It wasn't just that they wanted my house. They had been eating away at my financial foundation for years. While I was eating ramen and saving every penny, they were living off my credit score, buying things they couldn't afford, signing my name with a flourish I could almost picture. That phrase my mother used on the porch, family asset, suddenly took on a sickly, terrifying meaning. They didn't just mean the house, they meant me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource, a vein of gold they could mine whenever they ran low. I grabbed my phone and dialed Eric back. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped the phone twice before hitting the call button. Eric, I rasped when he answered. You were right. How bad? He asked immediately. No, I told you so, just business. Bad, I said. Over $50,000 in debts I didn't know I had. Cards, loans, a car, all linked to their address. There was a silence on the line, heavy and cold. Natalie, listen to me very carefully. This is no longer a civil dispute about a house. This is federal crime. This is identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud. You're standing at a crossroads right now. I know, I whispered. If you do nothing, you are liable for that debt, he said. The banks will come for your house to pay it off. Your parents will drag you down with them. The only way to clear your name, the only way is to file a police report and sign a sworn affidavit that these debts were incurred via fraud. That means turning your parents in. I closed my eyes. I thought about my dad teaching me to ride a bike. I thought about my mom making soup when I was sick. Those memories were faded, sepia-toned things. But they were there. Could I really be the person who sent their parents to prison? Then I thought about the trash bags on the porch. I thought about the look in my mother's eyes when she threatened to sue me for the home I built. I thought about the years of tough love that was really just neglect wrapped in arrogance. They didn't hesitate, I said to the empty room. They stole from me while looking me in the eye. Natalie, Eric asked. Tell me what to do, I said. I'm ready to burn it down. The next week was a blur of bureaucracy and nausea. I took days off work explaining to Monica that I had a family legal emergency. She didn't pry, just told me to take the time I needed. I went to the police station first. Sitting across from a detective in a cramped coffee-stained room, I laid out the printed credit reports. I circled the fraudulent accounts in red ink. And you suspect who? The detective asked, clicking his pen. My parents, I said, Diane and Gerald Brooks. The detective looked up, his eyebrows raised. You know once you file this, you can't unring that bell? The DA picks it up. It's out of your hands. I know, I said. File it. Next came the banks. I spent hours on hold, listening to terrible jazz music, waiting to speak to fraud departments. I had to send notarized letters, copies of the police report, and proof of my residency to show I wasn't living at the parents' house when these loans were originated. Every time I explained the story to a customer service rep, yes, my mother, yes, without my permission, I felt a fresh wave of humiliation. But underneath the shame, a steel rod was forming in my spine. I was reclaiming my name, letter by letter, account by account. While I was scrubbing the financial filth off my record, my parents were getting desperate. They didn't know I had found the fraud yet. They just knew I hadn't let them in. They escalated. It started with letters from a lawyer, a cheap strip mall guy who probably barely passed the bar. The letters claimed filial responsibility and demanded I pay them a monthly stipend or grant them tenancy in my home. They were bluffing, trying to steer me into compliance. Then came the social media campaign. Jenna posted long, tearful videos on TikTok about how her rich tech sister abandoned her aging parents and left them homeless. She didn't mention the fraud. She didn't mention the abuse. She just painted a picture of a heartless villain in an ivory tower. People in the comments ate it up. They called me names I won't repeat. For a day, I wanted to reply. I want to know me. People know me. People wanted to scream the truth. But Eric stopped me. Don't fight in the mud. He said, fight in court. Let them dig their hole. We're about to bury them in it. The climax didn't happen in a courtroom with a gavel banging. It happened in my living room, via a Zoom call. My parents' foreclosure was finalized. They were days away from eviction. Desperate, they actually filed a lawsuit against me claiming constructive trust, arguing that because they raised me, the money I earned was partially theirs, and therefore the house was community property. It was legally absurd, a Hail Mary thrown by people who had run out of options. My lawyer, a shark named Sarah, whom Eric had referred me to, set up a deposition. My parents were on one screen, sitting in their living room surrounded by packing boxes, looking smug. Their lawyer looked bored. I sat in my home office, Sarah beside me. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, Sarah started calmly, you are claiming that you have a financial interest in Natalie's home because you contributed to her financial success. Is that correct? Absolutely, my mom said, chin high. We supported her. We managed her finances for years. I saw Sarah smile. It was a terrifying smile. Managed her finances, Sarah repeated. Interesting choice of words. Does that management include the Wells Fargo credit card opened in 2021? My mom blinked. I don't know what you mean. Or the SoFi personal loan from last year? Sarah continued, sliding a paper across the desk so it was visible on camera. The one used to pay for the new roof on your house? My dad shifted in his seat. Now wait a minute, he stammered. That was, that was a misunderstanding. We were going to pay it back. So you admit you took the loan out in Natalie's name? Sarah asked. We had implied consent, my mom shouted. We are her parents. Her credit is our credit. That, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper, is a confession to federal bank fraud. She held up the police report. She held up the affidavit I had signed. We aren't just here to dismiss your lawsuit for the house, Sarah said. We're here to inform you that the fraud investigation has been turned over to the district attorney. And since you used the mail to execute some of these applications, the postal inspector is involved too. And the IRS, since you didn't declare that loan income. On the screen, the color drained from my mother's face. It was instantaneous. The arrogance, the entitlement, the smugness, it vanished, replaced by the sheer naked terror of a trapped animal. My dad looked at my mom. Diane, he said she wouldn't check. He said she wouldn't know. Shut up, Gerald, she hissed. This deposition is over, their lawyer said, slamming his laptop shut. The screen went black. I sat back in my chair, exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 years. What happens now? I asked Sarah. Now? She said, gathering her papers. Now? They get lawyers who do criminal defense. And you? You go live your life. The fallout was slow, and then it was all at once. My parents dropped the lawsuit against me the next day. But you can't drop a criminal investigation. The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind exceedingly fine, because the amounts were significant, and because they had targeted their own child. The DA wasn't lenient. My parents were charged with identity theft and fraud. They took a plea deal to avoid a lengthy trial. They didn't go to prison for decades, but they didn't walk away scot-free either. My mother served 18 months. My dad got probation and community service, largely because he turned state's evidence against her, claiming she masterminded the applications. The united front of the Brooks family crumbled the second handcuffs came out. They lost the big house, obviously. It was foreclosed on and sold. The proceeds went to pay off the bank, not them. Jenna, realizing the gravy train had not only derailed but exploded, stopped making TikToks about me. She moved in with a boyfriend 3 towns over and got a job as a receptionist. We haven't spoken since the day on the porch. As for me, I spent the next year rebuilding. Not my finances. Those were cleared once the fraud was proven. But my head. I went to therapy. I sat on a couch and cried about the birthday when I was 26. I cried about the parents I wanted versus the parents I got. I grieved the loss of them, even though they were toxic. It is a strange thing to mourn people who are still alive, to mourn a relationship that was only ever a one-way street. But slowly, the grief turned into peace. My house became exactly what I wanted it to be. I painted the front door a bright, defiant yellow. I planted a garden in the back. I adopted a dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Bandit, who didn't care about my credit score, only about belly rubs. I kept moving up at work. I started mentoring other self-taught developers, looking for the ones who had that hungry look in their eyes, the ones who were running from something. I became the person Monica was to me. One rainy Tuesday, 3 years after the confrontation on the porch, I received a letter. It was from a correctional facility. The handwriting was my mother's spiky, aggressive script I knew well. I stood by my mailbox, the rain soaking my hair, holding the envelope. I knew what was inside. It would be a guilt trip, or a demand, or a fake apology designed to open the door just a crack, so she could wedge her foot in again. I'm old, it would say. I'm sorry, it would lie. Family is everything, it would manipulate. I didn't open it. I walked to the recycling bin at the side of the house. I lifted the lid and dropped the envelope in. It landed on top of a stack of junk mail, right where it belonged. I went inside and locked the door. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, looking out over the Seattle skyline. The city lights twinkled like distant stars. I thought about the concept of a family asset. My parents were wrong about the house. The house was just wood and brick and glass. It was property. The real asset was me, my resilience, my ability to learn a new language in the dark, my capacity to survive the motel room and the eviction and the betrayal, my willingness to stand up and say no when yes would have been easier. They tried to steal my credit, my home, and my future because they were empty inside. They needed to consume me, to feel full. But I was not a resource to be mined. I was a person to be known. And since they refused to know me, they lost the privilege of having me. If you are listening to this and you feel like you owe your parents something because they fed you and clothed you, stop. That is the bare minimum. That is what you do when you bring a life into the world. You do not get a receipt for raising a child. You do not get to cash in your offspring like a savings bond when you retire. And if you are scared to check your credit report because you are afraid of what you might find, do it. Do it tonight. If you are afraid to set a boundary because you think you'll lose your family, set it. The people who leave you because you declared your own worth were never really with you to begin with. I'm Natalie. I'm 32 years old. I have no parents, no inheritance, and no childhood bedroom to visit on holidays, but I have a home. I have a name that is purely mine. And when I look in the mirror, I like the woman staring back. She's the only family asset I'll ever need. If this story resonated with you, if you're fighting your own battle for independence, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And subscribe for more stories about breaking cycles and building lives from the ashes. You are stronger than the people who tried to break you. Never forget that. Thanks for listening.